In the late 17th century, Salem, a small Puritan settlement in Massachusetts, was a community under pressure. Daily life was harsh and strict, shaped by religious beliefs, fear of the unknown, and social hierarchies. Imagine a village where everyone knew each other and the rumors traveled faster than letters. The people of Salem believed in a literal devil who was always at work, and any unusual event could be seen as a sign of his influence. Crop failures, disease, and tensions with neighboring indigenous groups created an environment of fear and uncertainty. It was within this context that the first accusations of witchcraft emerged. A group of young girls claimed to be afflicted by witchcraft, showing strange behaviors like fits, screaming, and contortions. Their claims quickly escalated into accusations against neighbors. But why did these girls' experiences gain such power? In part, it was because the community was already primed to see the world through the lens of sin, devilry, and moral threat. The combination of religious zeal, social tension, and fear created fertile ground for what we now recognize as mass hysteria, where panic spreads and rational judgment is overwhelmed by collective fear. Historians suggest multiple triggers for this initial panic. Personal vendettas and local rivalries played a role. Accusations often targeted people who were outsiders, economically vulnerable, or otherwise socially marginalized. The very act of accusing someone became a tool to assert control, settle disputes, or explain misfortune in an unpredictable world. In this way, the trials were not just a reflection of religious belief, but also a mirror of social anxieties and human behavior under stress. The first part of the Salem witch trials demonstrates how hysteria can emerge when fear is combined with rigid belief systems and social tension. The more people are accused, the more others feel compelled to join in, either to protect themselves or to make sense of the chaos. Understanding the origins of Salem's panic helps us see how mass hysteria does not appear out of nowhere, but grows from fear, uncertainty, and human psychology. Once the initial accusations began, the fear in Salem escalated rapidly. What started with a few girls claiming to be bewitched soon engulfed the entire village. People began pointing fingers at neighbors, friends, and even family members. Each accusation seemed to confirm the next, creating a feedback loop of panic. Courts were overwhelmed with claims, and the legal system, unprepared for such mass fear, struggled to separate truth from hysteria. In Salem, evidence of witchcraft was based on spectral evidence, the testimony that the spirits or specter of the accused appeared to the victim and caused harm. Imagine a courtroom where invisible forces were considered proof of guilt. Such evidence, impossible to disprove, fueled the panic further. Judges and magistrates, deeply embedded in Puritan beliefs, accepted these testimonies seriously, giving institutional weight to the hysteria. The accused came from all walks of life, but patterns emerge when we examine who was targeted. Women, especially those who were outspoken, widowed, or socially marginal, were disproportionately accused. This reflects underlying gender and social dynamics, where women who did not conform to social expectations became convenient symbols of evil. Men too were accused, but the focus on women shows how cultural fears intersected with the panic. The court procedures themselves intensified the hysteria. Trials were public, allowing crowds to witness the fear firsthand. Children testified, neighbors implicated one another, and even minor slips or nervous behavior could be interpreted as proof of guilt. The atmosphere was one of the suspicion and tension, where fear overrode reason, and everyone became both observer and participant in the spreading panic. By 1692, the situation had spiraled out of control. What started as local anxiety about unexplained illness and behavior became a large-scale witch hunt. Mass hysteria had taken hold, demonstrating how fear can permeate a community when it's legitimized by authority, reinforced by belief, and amplified by social dynamics. By the height of the Salem witch trials in 1692, dozens of individuals faced accusations, imprisonment, and in many cases, execution. One of the earliest and most notable cases was that of Bridget Bishop, a tavern owner known for her outspoken personality and nonconformity. She was accused of witchcraft after several girls claimed she had afflicted them with specters. Despite her defense, she was found guilty and became the first person executed in Salem, hanged on June 10, 1692. Her case set a chilling precedent, showing that social standing or personal reputation could not protect anyone once fear and suspicion took hold. Another tragic example is Rebecca Nurse, an elderly and respected woman in the community. Many were shocked when she was accused, as she had led a pious and morally upright life. Her trial revealed how hysteria could override evidence and common sense. Despite her reputation and pleas of innocence, she was convicted and executed, highlighting the extreme power of collective fear and the danger of mass hysteria in overriding justice. The trials also involved children and adolescents, some of whom became key witnesses in accusing others. The famous case of Abigail Williams and Betty Paris, young girls whose initial fits of strange behavior sparked the crisis, illustrates how youthful fear and suggestion could escalate into nationwide panic. These girls' testimonies, often describing visions and attacks by invisible forces, were taken seriously by the courts and used as evidence against the accused. By the end of these trials, more than 200 people were accused, with 19 executed by hanging and one man pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. Many others were imprisoned under harsh conditions, and some died due to disease or mistreatment while in jail. The economic and social impacts were profound, as families were torn apart, property was lost, and the tight-knit Puritan community was left shaken and distrustful. The Salem witch trials were also shaped by the broader context of the time. Puritan beliefs about the devil, sin, and spiritual warfare provided fertile ground for fear. Political instability in Massachusetts, including a recent change in government authority and ongoing conflicts with indigenous people, amplified anxieties. Social tension, rivalries, and resentment between families often manifested through accusations of witchcraft. Scholars argue that the trials were not just about superstition, but about power, control, and the enforcement of social norms in a community already stressed by uncertainty. This tragic episode serves as one of the most famous examples of mass hysteria in history, illustrating how fear, social pressure, and authority can converge to create catastrophic consequences. From Bridget Bishop to Rebecca Nurse, the stories of the accused reveal both individual suffering and the devastating effects of collective panic. As the Salem witch trials began to wind down in late 1692 and early 1693, the community slowly started to confront the grave errors that had occurred. Public opinion shifted when prominent members of the community, including ministers and judges, began expressing doubts about the validity of spectral evidence. Claims that the accused were harming others through visions or invisible forces. The recognition that fear and superstition had overridden reason was painful but necessary for the town to heal. One significant step toward justice came when Governor William Phips dissolved the special court that had handled the witch trials and replaced it with a more standard judicial process. This marked the beginning of official reconsideration of many cases, and some of the accused were released from prison. Families of those wrongfully convicted began petitioning the government for restitution. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court passed a bill restoring the rights and good names of those accused and provided financial compensation to surviving family members. The trials also had long-term legal and cultural consequences. For example, the use of spectral evidence was discredited, shaping future judicial practices to require more concrete proof. Additionally, the trials highlighted the dangers of allowing fear and religious extremism to dominate governance and social interactions. The experience left an indelible mark on American society, influencing writers, historians, and psychologists who studied how panic and collective fear could lead to tragic results. In personal terms, the survivors of Salem endured stigma and hardship. Families had to rebuild their reputations, and communities struggled to restore trust. Some families preserved written accounts and letters that have become valuable historical documents today, providing insights into both the fear and resilience of the time. Psychologists and sociologists later studied the Salem witch trials as a classic example of mass hysteria, where stress, fear, and social pressure create a cycle of accusation and panic. The events reveal how tightly knit communities under stress, especially those with strong belief systems, can spiral into rationality, and how authority figures may unintentionally amplify hysteria by legitimizing unfounded fears. The Salem witch trials continue to be studied as a cautionary tale about the dangers of fear, social pressure, and unchecked authority. One of the most important lessons is how mass hysteria can distort reality and make communities act against their own moral and legal principles. In Salem, fear of the devil, combined with social tensions, economic rivalries, and personal grudges, created a perfect storm that led to accusations and executions. Modern historians note that Salem was not unique. Similar episodes occurred in other parts of Europe and colonial America, though Salem is among the most infamous because of its scale and the thorough documentation that survives. Social historians point out that gender played a central role in the witch trials. Most of the accused were women, many of whom were older, widowed, or socially marginalized. This reflects broader patterns in patriarchal societies where women outside the mainstream of social power were often targets during times of crisis. Men, although fewer, were not exempt. Male witches were sometimes accused when their behaviors or beliefs challenged community norms. This focus on gender reveals how social anxieties can disproportionately affect certain groups and highlights the intersection of fear, power, and prejudice. The Salem witch trials have also inspired cultural reflection. Literature, theater, and film have repeatedly drawn upon Salem as a symbol of injustice and the consequences of extremism. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, for example, used the trials as an allegory for the anti-communist Red Scare of the 1950s, demonstrating how historical events can resonate across time when societies confront fear and persecution. Educational programs frequently use Salem as a case study to teach about critical thinking, the rule of law, and the dangers of rumor and mentality. From a legal perspective, the trials contributed to reforms in evidence and judicial procedure. Courts began emphasizing the need for tangible proof and were increasingly wary of testimony based solely on visions or accusations without corroboration. These changes influenced the development of American legal principles and underscored the importance of protecting individual rights, even in times of communal stress or moral panic. Ultimately, the Salem witch trials remained relevant because they illustrate the universal vulnerabilities of human societies. Communities under pressure, whether from disease, economic hardship, or social change, may react irrationally. Salem reminds us that unchecked fear can override reason, that authority figures can unintentionally validate harmful beliefs, and that the consequences of such hysteria are often devastating for individuals and families.